One thing that makes video game characters who they are their hearts and personality. Maybe they are determined, blooming, heartless, unforgiving, entertaining, hopeful, or maybe they're just sympathetic. But in terms of Halloween, there are many characters that just really crawl under our skin that make us frightened or disturbed. So many weird, disgusting, or just flat out creepy characters have plagued the video game industry for a long time since the 80s. From horror games, dark games, to even child-friendly games, to just simply non-horror games. But which 10 characters disturb me the most? Well, here it is. Before I get in, I just want to say that story spoilers are present everywhere in this video. So if you haven't played any of these games, don't watch this video. Or, you know, if you don't care about spoilers, then that's fine too, I guess. And one more thing, I am going to include characters from horror games on this list, but I'm going to restrict and minimize myself to the amount I can put on the list. So I'm going to only put 2 or 3 horror game characters on here. At any rate, let the scares commence. Pokemon's not really a game series when you think of disturbing characters. Whenever people think of this series, they think of training more Pokemon and getting to become friends with them. You know, like a sane person. But ever since Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, all the Pokemon stories have gone from train to compete in a Pokemon League and beat all 8 gym battles. While ever since Colosseum XD Gale of Darkness, they're now overshadowed by dark plots. And by the time you reach the Aether Paradise in Generation 7, don't let this place fool you because their boss is a complete, insane MILF. Team Plasma may hold the title as the greatest Pokemon team, but Lusamine holds the title as greatest villain in Pokemon history. You meet this MILF once in the game, which is also the same scene when you meet the Ultra Beast Nihilego, but it turns out later on that Lusamine has been doing these experiments to use the Ultra Beast in her way as protecting the world. And it all started because her husband got sucked for an Ultra wormhole and wants to find him badly. She has a thing for all things beautiful, which eventually caused her to have a collection of frozen Pokemon like she's Frostlass. I'm not joking, Frostlass's Pokedex entry says so. Anyways, because of her obsessiveness for beautification, both her kids Lily and Gladion became fixated on their mother's actions, and took 2 rare Pokemon from the Aether Foundation, with Gladion taking the type Null, and Lily taking Cosmog, who she nicknames Nebby. Anyways, both Lusamine and Team Skull's leader Guzma both enter the Ultra Wormhole with the impossibility of convincing Lusamine to reason, and she decides to stay in Ultra Space, saying that the Nihilego is all she cares about now, pretty much disowning both her children and fuse with Nihilego to become the embodiment of villainous beauty obsession, Mother Beast Lusamine. Eventually, after beating her, she finally does come to her senses at last. Lusamine, however, was changed in the Pokemon Sun and Moon anime, which is such a guilty pleasure of mine, to not have an obsession of beauty and is actually a hero. Granted, Mother Beast Lusamine still does exist in the anime, but it's more along the lines of fusing against her will. You would think that the president of the Aether Foundation shouldn't be on the list, but she's here because you wouldn't believe someone as sadistic and insane as her would be in a Pokemon game, from solidifying beautiful Pokemon because of her obsession for all things pretty and fusing herself with a very dangerous Pokemon that is all she cares about. And the reason why she's only on number 10 is because despite her plan, she's not as disturbing as the others. Just plain and simple. Anyways, Lusamine, greatest Pokemon villain of all time, for all the creepy reasons. The reputation of villains in the Sonic series have been very hit or miss. Mostly miss. You got amazing ones such as Eggman and Metal Sonic, bad ones such as Black Doom and Zavok, and even wasted potential such as Infinite. There aren't actually many villains that are disturbing in the series. Dark Gaia was the closest due to his disgusting Perfect Dark Gaia transformation, and despite Black Doom being my least favorite Sonic character of all time, I would be lying if I said that his manipulative speeches didn't creep me out from time to time. But however, none can surpass Mephiles the Dark, or Mephiles the Dark if you're a frickin' idiot.
For Mephiles the Dark.
So for those who don't know who the hell this guy is, Mephiles is one half of the eternal sun god Solaris, with another half being Iblis. 10 years ago, the Duke of Soliana attempted to perform a Solaris project, but however the level's overridden and caused an accident, which not only caused deaths of the Solianan scientists, but including the Duke himself, and the flame Iblis and the Black Shadow Mephiles escaped. Mephiles was able to be caught and sealed in the Scepter of Darkness by Shadow. 10 years later, Mephiles escaped from the Scepter and gave himself a look in the form of none other than the shadow of the person in front of him, Shadow. He teleported himself to the future where he meets Silver and Blaze and manipulates them into believing they must kill the Iblis Trigger in order to save the future, which Silver was shown that Sonic is the supposed Iblis Trigger, which in fact, Mephiles is not wrong. This may sound a bit confusing for a moment because it is time travel, but bear with me. See, Sonic is kind of the Iblis Trigger, but not in the way that you believe it to be. As the person that Sonic interacted and saved numerous times, Princess Elise III is in fact the vessel for Iblis, since before the Duke died, which is also her father, he sealed Iblis inside of her, and she cannot cry because otherwise the seal will be broken and cause destruction to the world. Say what you all want about Elise, it may be unrealistic, but being able to not cry for 10 years is such a remarkable achievement. And as Tony Sonic puts it, it takes a whole lot of willpower. Anyways, Mephiles' goal was targeted towards Sonic, and since Silver has a strong connection with defeating Iblis, and is quite naive and gullible, he manipulated him in order to kill Sonic, with Silver having the intention of believing that it would save the future. However, since Silver found the truth about Mephiles and decided to help Sonic rescue Elise in an attempt that failed, Mephiles decides to finish the job himself, being literally the only villain in Sonic history that has actually killed off Sonic. But Elise cries and awakens Iblis. It may sound weird even for Mephiles, but everything he does literally makes him the best Sonic villain of all time. I also love how he is towards Shadow, being who I believe to be Shadow's greatest enemy he's ever had, because, let's face facts, his dad was just hungry for human flesh. When Shadow finds out that he was sealed in the future, it turns out that after Iblis scorched the world, humanity becomes afraid of Shadow's power, seeing him as the biggest threat to the world. They decided to hunt him down, only later on in the story, it turns out that Omega was the one who sealed him before Omega went into standby mode. Which then, Mephiles tries to attempt to get Shadow to join his side to get justice for the unforgiving humans that were feared of his power and sealed him away. But Shadow knows better than to be controlled and deceived, and doesn't care one bit about what the planet thinks of him. He will continue fighting to protect them and determine his own fate and destiny. Mephiles the Dark, all in all, is sadistic, manipulative, intelligent, strong, and the way of how Dan Green does its performance really shows the terror and manipulation that Mephiles gives off. Also, again, it's pronounced Mephiles, not Mephiles, Sega.
For Mephiles the Dark.
You're a fucking idiot.
Despite it being a more lighthearted experience compared to every single Shin Megami Tensei game prior, don't let it fool you because Persona 4 is still dark. And trust me, it's really hard not to go into a mystery murder game without spoiling who the culprit is, so major spoilers ahead. But instead of giving you the rundown, let's just get onto it. Also, I'll give you 5 seconds to skip to the next segment or to leave the video to avoid spoilers if you haven't played Persona 4 nor Golden yet. Toru Adachi is a guy who you initially believe to be a very charming and nice fellow. Despite his screw-ups in the police department, he does his job quite well. But that's a case of being absolutely too well. When Narukami arrived in Inaba, murder started happening, with the first case being Mayumi Yamano and the second case being Saki Kanishi. Once King Moron was murdered, it wasn't Adachi, it was the bastard Mitsuru who killed him just so that he could get fame and attention and refer to himself as a hero for killing someone despised by everyone. Later on, the gang suspected Namatame, who had an affair with Miss Yamano, and kidnapped Nanako in an attempt to save her. But it turns out that Namatame was truly in fact trying to save Miss Yamano, Saki, Nanako, and all your party members who were being targeted by the Midnight Channel. He has good intentions, but his ignorance caused a lot of harm than justice, and was stressed by the fact that he couldn't save Saki and Miss Yamano. However, as we learn, Adachi is the murderer. He unintentionally pushed Miss Yamano inside the TV in the room she was staying in at the Amagi Inn, and did it to Saki inside the interrogation room, only this time it was intentional. However, he became psychotic prior to discovering about the Midnight Channel, as he joined the police department just for the fact that he can use a gun. Doesn't sound much, but there's more to his plan than meets the eye. He intends to create a reality with no pain, no suffering, and no boundaries, and he plans to use the Midnight Channel to fill the city up with a fog, causing a rift between the TV world and the real world, effectively intoxicating humanity so that they be turned into shadows in order to make their dream a reality. Adachi believes that only those few selected with talent can escape, and everyone who aims has to deny and accept that they'll never achieve their dreams. Putting it short, Adachi threw away reality, society, and his own humanity so that he could achieve a dream that was once believed to be a fantasy and impossible in order to trample over the harsh world of reality. And he's right on some account, because reality is often incredibly disappointing. Now then, I know what you guys are thinking, and yes, I'm fully aware that Amano Sagiri manipulated Adachi and is responsible for the fog, but Adachi literally expressed himself that it was partially his true desire, and he is still responsible for the murders that happened throughout the past year. The reason I think Adachi is slightly more disturbing than Mephiles, aside from Sonic, he doesn't really kill anyone unless if you count the Solaris fusion that supposedly killed most of the world from the light, and he does reveal himself as a villain to pretty much everyone aside from Silver and Blaze. With Adachi, he managed to keep himself as a villain for so long while letting Mitsuo take the blame and Namatame being a high chances culprit for the murder, all while throwing society under the bus and believing there is a different way for reality to be lived with infinite limitations. The Walking Dead is a franchise where you learn that trust needs to be earned, but in the apocalypse, you don't know who you can trust. Everyone takes stuff from other survivors, every group has at least one or few traitors, nice people trick you into believing they're nice, people eventually losing their sanities over grief and loss, people killing one another. It's an endless onslaught of murders, blood, and walking corpses. Granted, there are very few people in the Walking Dead universe that are none of these things, such as Katja, Omid, and Chuck from Season 1, Luke and Alvin from Season 2, and Mariana from A New Frontier. But then there's the villain at the end of Season 1, who we don't know his real name, which makes him all the more creepier. Ever since the remaining survivors of the Motor Inn group made it to Savannah, all while picking up a few faces along the way, they're being watched. In fact, no, they've been watched ever since they were at the Motor Inn. And near the end of episode 4 of season 1, Clementine has been kidnapped and taken to the Marsh house, where Lee encounters a stranger. Funny, that's actually what he's called. Remember that car the group encounters in the forest after the horror experience at the St. John's Dairy? Yeah, that was the stranger's car, and the group took stuff from the car while you get a choice whether you want to take stuff or not. Throughout the entire scene, no music is being played, and very little sound effects, with Lee and the stranger discussing kinda quietly, with the stranger sometimes yelling if you somehow manage to upset him during the conversation.
I couldn't leave her at the house alone.
She would have been better off!
Because the stranger has been watching you the entire time, he will reminisce to you about many of the major choices that have impacted the story, which makes you seriously wonder if you honestly regret making some of those choices. Unlike villains such as Carver, Joan, and Lily, who are survival of the fittest villains, the stranger isn't. In fact, he isn't really what you would call a villain at all. He's just a dad. He took his son out hunting one time even though his wife told him that he was too young. And when he came back without his son, she gave him an expression that made her believe him as a monster. And it didn't take long for him to find both their bodies. I mean, for Christ's sake, he has his wife's head in his bag! However, the stranger asks Lee if he has ever hurt anyone. Specifically, the choices you get are his ex-wife, Clementine, and Kenny. And then Clementine escapes, hits the stranger, and Lee attempts to kill him. Lusamine and Adachi are disturbing characters because of the harsh worlds of reality and how the other worlds affected their mental states. Lusamine being obsessiveness and Adachi being Adachi. But the stranger is affected due to the loss of his son and how his wife saw him after. The stranger has to be without question the most realistic character in this entire list, because everyone's disturbances are caused through effects of power or others, but when it comes to the stranger, his one is caused through trauma and loss, and you can pretty much hear it through the tone in his voice. Such a character, man. Such a character. Before Suda51 created No More Heroes, there was another screwed up guy we love codenamed Hideo Kojima with Metal Gear, a series about preventing nuclear terrorism and a world war, all while fighting supernatural soldiers. In Metal Gear Solid, there is a team called Foxhound based in Alaska at Shadow Moses Island. Ocelot, Raven, and Liquid are quite possibly the most normal of a bunch, but there's a female sniper who can go without food or water for days or even weeks, and number 6, a paranormal telekinetic who is able to read your goddamn PS1 and GameCube memory card. It definitely cannot be a disturbing characters list without Psycho Mantis rating my every thought. When you enter the B1 floor in the nuclear warhead storage building, one time, you may notice that the music seems soothing yet disturbing. Meryl eventually gets caught by Psycho Mantis' mind control ability to control Meryl by seducing Snake, calling him gay, and leaving Snake with no choice but to knock her out. Psycho Mantis will reveal himself and tell you that he can read your every thought by literally goddamn reading your memory card. Depending on what the choices are, he will tell you how often you save the game, your playstyle due to the alert steps and traps, and the games you have played. For the original PS1 version, he will say Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Suikoden, Azure Dreams, and Vandal Hearts, with 2 added ones in the Japanese version being Tokimeki Memorial and Police Knots. And in the 2004 remake for Twin Snakes, he will say The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, Super Mario Sunshine, Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem, and Super Smash Bros. Melee. He also breaks the 4th wall by making the controller literally move if you have the rumble feature turned on. And if you think I'm joking, just freaking watch.
Now I will move your controller by the power of my will alone.
When the fight starts, Psycho Mantis can't be hit because he knows your every move, so you have to switch controller ports to beat him, while if you have the game on PS3 like me, then you have to hold the home button down, go to the controller settings, and change the controller to input 2. One of his abilities is a mind freak in the fight by turning the screen to black for a short period of time, with Hideo on the side instead of video. After the fight, he uses his power one last time to help us find the way forward to the communications tower. It is at this point when we learn about how Mantis became who he is. His mother died in childbirth and his father hated him for it, but Mantis didn't know it until he first used his telekinetic powers in his father's mind and realized the truth. With the disgust of his father's resentment and his fear of being killed, he burned down his whole village, which in turn killed his father. In Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain, Mantis was the only survivor during a plane crash and was transported to a nearby research lab, where he got the gas mask in the first place and went under the codename Tretij Rebenok, which means fur child in Russian. The lab focused on researching paranormal powers inside individuals, and not only that, a comatose body of Volgin was there too. Mantis sensed the hatred Volgin had for Big Boss, and his hatred influenced Mantis, and both of them burned down the facility. Both of them later teamed up with Skullface and controlled Metal Gear Sahelanthropus to hunt down and kill Snake and Huey. So yeah, all in all, Psycho Mantis is creepy. As cool and creative as he is, the impact he had on us and revealed our private information on our poor dear memory cards had an impact on gaming and just fourfold breakings in general. I bet you Xenosaga fans were waiting for this specific entry. We all know Albedo from the anime/manga Overlord and Albedo from Genshin Impact, but before them, we have Albedo from Xenosaga. Oh man, this guy. Albedo is the twin brother of the main character Rubido, and Albedo has the ability to regenerate. How does this make him creepy? Well, let's just say he cuts up his own body parts as a hobby. Albedo is literally a sadist who doesn't mind killing anybody, mainly due to the fact that he learned that he's the only one who can regenerate while no one else can, which changed him. He wants to be like them, knowing full well that he has to spend the rest of his life being an immortal, watching everyone he loves die around him for generations upon generations, millennia upon millennia. Albedo's nihilism arrives when he tells Rubido that what Rubido thought was contaminated by Yudo, Albedo claimed it to be evolution, thinking that life would be meaningless and was free from the shackles of mortality, believing himself to be both of the alpha and omega of perfect consciousness, and a perfect consciousness has no true physical form. In turn, he questioned the point of humanity's existence and purpose, and also started to believe humanity to be delusional, while also believing that deities and religions are a way of coping with the reality of a meaningless existence. Whenever he loves to murder people himself, he also just enjoys to watch them suffer as well. And yeah, like I said before, his masochism allows him to cut off his own body parts. Every time he decapitates his own head, I swear I feel disgusted by it. That and the scene where he sticks his hand inside Momo, a literal child. In Xenosaga Episode 3, while he does come back as a testament free of his attachment, he still does not change, but he does know now that he is under his own control. While Albedo is sadistic, nihilistic, masochistic, and psychotic, combined with the hatred of humanity's restrictions for Adachi and the depressing backstory for Psycho Mantis, like both in all the previous 5, Albedo is such a cool character. His viewpoints of life make him blinded to the answer of life, thinking that life is meaningless, and Yudo being the only true god. And his sadism, nihilism, masochism, and psychoticism are the reasons why I believe he deserves to be in the top 5. More of a shorter entry compared to the previous entry, but hey, what can I say? I'm just not as intelligent on Xenosaga as I am with other franchises. While Nintendo is mostly known for being a family-friendly company on their consoles, they have T-rated games, M-rated games, and even R-rated games from third-party companies. But even then, there are Nintendo games that are secretly dark. Case in point, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. And yes, number 4 goes to Majora. While never seen in its true form, we still know well enough to know that Majora is still one of the creepiest things that Nintendo has ever made. Long ago, a mysterious tribe used the mask in hexing rituals until the Ancient Ones feared what all the great troubles that it brought and eventually sealed it away. One day, it was picked up later by the Happy Mask Salesman you meet at the beginning of the game. However, the Skull Kid eventually robbed him and took the mask, which in turn possessed the kid, and its jokes turned into carnage by stealing away the deity's Termina, the 4 giants, into other masks worn by 4 of the monsters in 4 different locations. Adowa from Woodhead Temple, Goats from Snowhead Temple, Yorg from Great Bay Temple, and Twin Mold from Stone Tower Temple. Eventually, the Skull Kid directed the moon on a crash course to Termina and will demolish everything in 3 days. Once the 4 giants are restored and able to stop the moon's course collision, Majora eventually retreats and ascends into the moon and leaves its puppet, the Skull Kid, behind. However, inside the moon with its freakishly yet beautiful serene playing field, lies a mysterious child wearing Majora's Mask and asks Link if he could play with him, a game of good guys versus bad guys. And when the final confrontation begins, Majora decides to fight Link itself in its 3 different forms. Starting with Majora's Mask floating around the arena attempting to attack Link. then comes Majora's incarnation, growing arms, legs, and a torso. This one is more childish since it'll throw actual temper tantrums and creepy shrieks, and attack by ramming into Link and throwing energy balls. And then the final phase is Majora's Wrath, which grows appendages with great accuracy and has formed a demonic head. This one also manages to also maintain the child mannerisms of Majora's incarnation. I mean, Majora's depraved and bizarre design with its personality, very dark backstory, and extremely powerful magic make the deity a creep to behold in a lot of Nintendo's backlog of weird disturbing ideas for a kid-friendly company. Undertale. Thou shalt make thee choices depending on thy kills. And because I brought up Undertale, you already know who it is. Undertale is somewhat kinda like a Telltale game. Every choice you make has an impact on the story, but it depends due to the fates of the boss fights. There's a spare or kill option, and each time you kill or spare the bosses changes how the story progresses. The first major character Frisk encounters is a character called Flowey, who may seem like a cute, innocent sunflower at first. But don't forget, this is Undertale we're talking about, not Kirby. And he can be an antagonist in the neutral and true pacifist routes, but if you decide to do a genocide run, he is a deuteragonist. If you don't know what that is, a deuteragonist is a character who is a secondary character and a villain can be one too. What's creepy at the start is when Flowey decides to attack you with bullets he calls friendliness pellets. Dodge 3 times, he will slip his friendly act and snaps at you hypocritically. At one point, he will unleash an unavoidable ring of bullets before Toriel intervenes to save you. If you kill Flowey on a previous neutral route, or if you aborted a genocide route, he will not interact with you again until you reach New Home again. If you spare Flowey, if you gain EXP, he reminds you not to kill anyone. But if you don't, he will remind you to befriend everybody. Near the end, if you decide to spare Asgore, Flowey will up and kill him himself and absorb the 6 bottled human souls. And then the game crashes. Okay. And then when you open Undertale up again, you get this monstrosity. The monster that is named Photoshop Flowey. Yes, that is its official name. This thing has 2 mandibles with a TV monitor on top, floating eyeballs, and cacti-looking appendages. Apparently, this body resembles the DT extraction machine structure what Dr. Alphys used to extract determination from the 6 souls. How you get into this battle is already a mind in itself, with getting back to the game has a corrupted version of Undertale's introduction with a glitch noise playing until the player presses Z, which then the game gives an option to load a save of Flowey's creation title, My World, with his level being 9,999 with playtime being 9,999 hours and 99 minutes. Wow. Once you get into the save, you walk north in the dark void until the player finds a save point and finds out that their save file has been erased and that the dialog box is cracked repeatedly. And guess who decides to crack through the dialog box with a large face? Yes, the creepy flower, mocking you for helping him unwillingly destroy Asgore and takes the 7th soul, yours, and shows everyone the true meaning of the world. Kill or be killed. Flowey just takes breaking the 4th wall to an extensive amount that makes it very cool and creative, like Psycho Mantis, who can only read your memory card, move your controller, and tell you how often you avoid alerts, deaths, and traps. But after Flowey came another character 2 years later in the year of 2017 that took influence from him. You would be surprised we haven't had a character from an actual horror game on this list yet. That changes now. Man, Doki Doki Literature Club, a cute and charming visual novel with 4 fantastic girls, and oh my god, what the fuck? Yep, Team Salvato knew what they were doing. Take one of the most popular dairy types, yanderes, and turn it into a horror sim. Like Flowey, there's another character that is like him. Monica. Why is that? Well, it all happened when Sayori was acting extremely weird. And you wanted to know why she was acting weird? Because of Monica, who has the ability to alter personality traits and deemed Sayori as a threat to her due to Sayori being MC's childhood friend. Which then changed Sayori, and it ended up backfiring on her because Sayori's increased depression made her confess to the MC in some way to find happiness. Which eventually caused Monica to make Sayori commit suicide and delete her character file, since apparently Sayori was the one who was making this difficult. She becomes more manipulative in the second act, aka the timeline without Sayori, as she was pissed off by not having a romantic role, and that there was no happy ending coded for her, only for either Yuri or Natsuki, and that she tries her best to intervene so consistently that she alters Natsuki and Yuri's personality traits, with Yuri being the creepiest by having her poem papers drenched in blood and piss, and Monica makes Yuri abuses her knife habit to the max by making Yuri kill herself by stabbing herself with her own knife, and with Natsuki snapping her own neck. Then in Act 3, she deletes both Yuri and Natsuki's files, starting the Just Monica segment. The act symbolizes Monica's loneliness and also knowing full well that her world is just a game, and that she cannot achieve happiness since her route is endless. This arc is literally taking place in a hellish void with a lone desk, unable to talk, and move with Monica staring at you, the player, not the protagonist, but the real you, conversing with you through the entirety with just Monica, with no real way to end this trauma, unless you go into your files and delete Monica's character file. When she finds out you deleted her character file, she will get upset at you until she realizes the consequences of her actions, and tell you that even though the girls were real or not, she still considered them as friends. But I wonder what number 1 could be. But before we get there, let's reach some honorable mentions. Lady Dimitrescu from Resident Evil Village. Seductive mother that's 10 feet tall, and she becomes a horrifying threat if you take her off. Visaro from Metal Gear Solid 3. A ghost who's already dead when the battle begins. His attack is basically a jump scare and his eyes bleed. Matt Helms from No More Heroes 2. He's drenched in blood, has a flamethrower that's also an axe, and he was left to die in the house, basically abandoned by his parents. Midori Midorikawa from No More Heroes 3. Her introduction scene speaks for itself. The only reason why she couldn't make the list is that after the fight she's barely creepy at all. Trevor Phillips from Grand Theft Auto 5. Once you piss him off, he becomes a killing machine. Kefka Palazzo from Final Fantasy VI. He ends up destroying the world, poisoning rivers and towns, and becomes a god at the end. Devora from Mortal Kombat, made up of a lot of bugs and uses them in disgusting ways. And Dimentio from Super Paper Mario. I mean, in the very first encounter, he possesses a guardian of a pure heart to fight Mario just to get destroyed, all for his amusement. Okay, unlike all entries below, I must say this. Out of everything I researched for disturbing characters, I have to put a warning here. If you are highly uncomfortable with conversations about rape and suicide, and then I suggest you leave this video now, because I can't get through this entry without talking about this character's backstory. I'll give you 5 seconds skip. No more, no less. Alright? 5 seconds begin. In Silent Hill 2, James Sunderland gets a letter from his dead wife Mary and heads to Silent Hill in order to search for her. On James's journey, he meets a lot of characters from the weird to the most disturbing. Maria, for one, has a very clear resemblance to his dead wife. Laura is often seen wandering around Silent Hill all alone. Eddie was drawn to Silent Hill after being ridiculed and bullied his whole life. The Pyramid Heads, who looked disturbing and mysterious in their own right, and even James himself, who turned out was the one who killed his own wife at the hotel they were staying in. All these characters are disturbing, but the culprit here is a woman called Angela Orozco. Like how James came to Silent Hill to search for his wife, Angela came to Silent Hill to search for her mother. Over the course of the game, Angela is known to be quite shy and timid, though that is of course when it comes to strangers such as James himself, and she is known to stutter in her sentences when she speaks, and her lack of confidence also makes her keep apologizing. Now then, I know what you're thinking. Is Angela seriously on this list because she's shy and timid? No, that's only part of the reason. And believe me, when researching her backstory, I was absolutely disgusted, and that is the reason why I had to put her on this list. She had a super depressed and violent childhood due to her being a victim of sexual abuse by both her father and her brother throughout her life. And her father would also physically beat her as well. I mean, what the actual hell? This not only changed her life entirely, but like Albedo, she finds life meaningless, and in turn not only gave her severe cases of pessimism and nihilism, but also complex PTSD, social anxiety, long-term depression, unmotivation, and suicidal thoughts. The novelation says that what she hates is how she looks, and when she looks in the mirror, describing herself as an ugly thing that doesn't look like herself anymore. This is a common thing among sexual abuse victims and people suffering from depression and anxiety called body dysmorphic disorder, when people believe their looks are permanently damaged, unattractive, and repulsive. This comes into the fact with Angela when she wants every trace of her dysfunctional father gone from her, but she can't escape from the DNA and genes both her and her father share, which amplifies her negativity. Also, according to the novelation, it is said that Angela has tried to commit suicide multiple times, considering slitting her wrists, overdosing on drugs, and jumping off a building, but for some reason couldn't bring herself to do it. James intends to help Angela to get over her suicidal thoughts, but sadly it didn't work, as Angela said that James only cares about himself, and since James can say anything to that, his silence was enough to kill herself. On the fiery staircase, James sees Angela staring at a painting made of male corpses with blood-stained crotches, with holes where their crotches should be, implying Angela's hatred and contempt for her disgusting abusive father and brother. Angela also has the possibility of either misandry or androphobia, with misandry being a disliking of men and androphobia being a fear of men, with her enraged side being upset at James by saying it's always the same, you're only after one thing, you don't have to lie, go ahead and say it, which you obviously should guess what she's implying, and after James defeats the abstract daddy, Angela lashes out at it by smashing a TV at the top of its head after kicking it multiple times. This sexual abusiveness by her father and brother was so traumatic to her beyond belief that, I kid you not, she was also raped at work. F***ing hell! This led her to actually believe that all men are nothing more than beasts and only want that one specific thing to fulfill their desires. I mean, all this traumatic experience Angela has experienced her whole life. A victim of rape both at work and by her family, attempt to commit suicide multiple times, had several cases of depression, PTSD, nihilism, enragement, pessimism, androphobia or misandry, suicidal thoughts, unmotivation, social anxiety, timidity, an inescapable fate, and body dysmorphic disorder. There is no other character I can think of that deserves to be number one more than her. Angela deserved better. Far better. If she didn't have androphobia or misandry, I would want to give her a hug. I'm actually not joking around when I say that doing more research for this entry has legit disgusted me beyond goddamn belief. And speaking of which, I'm User One Campbell, and if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go puke.